welcome you to our afternoon panel, which is entitled Intersections in the Workforce Development, Creating Holistic Wellness for Unhoused and Disabled Populations. We have a great panel this afternoon of experts and leaders in the field here to share lots of innovation and inspiring work and really keep our conversation going today about this idea of the Great Resignation and this idea of an opportunity, right, in terms of workforce and the changing face and the changing experience of workforce. If you've had the pleasure of tuning into other panels today, you've heard themes, right, about opportunity, about whole person support, about well-being, and also about equity, right? So there's an ongoing theme today about equity. And in today's panel, we're going to peel back some more layers of equity. So in addition to if you are living in poverty or involved, impacted by systems or identify as a gender other than male, we are also talking about communities that are not having the same experience, right? Not having that same experience of recovery or opportunity in this wake of COVID. So I want to just kind of start with grounding us off in terms of what the context for our panel is today. So this idea of, there's a national narrative of opportunity, choice, remote work. People are leaving their jobs, feeling empowered, worker empowerment. And the communities that we are going to lift up in this panel this afternoon are having a disparate experience. These communities were having a disparate experience before COVID. And we know that COVID has broadened the gap for many communities, particularly in California. So you're going to hear from some great folks today in terms of what they've done, how they are changing the game, how they are implementing innovative strategies to provide supportive, whole person supports for these communities that we are talking about today. So before we get into our wonderful panelists, I want to share a little bit about myself. I am coming to you from Rubicon Programs this afternoon. Like me, Rubicon Programs is raised and rooted in Richmond, California. We are almost 50 years old. For some reason, we cannot see your, sorry. I'm sorry, I've just got to pop up. You can't see my video. Am I not visible to folks? Panelists, can you see me? Okay, can someone else in the chat let me know if you can see me or if that's a shared, someone that's not a panelist. If that's a shared experience, let us know. Okay, great, thank you. So I was saying, so Rubicon is one example of a holistic, whole person workforce development model. We've been around for 50 years, and we know that for most people, connecting them to work is not enough. We know that poverty is not simply a employment issue, right? Poverty is not solved by connecting someone to work or to income. And so it really is necessary, not a luxury, to have workforce programs as well as employer environments that really tend to see the whole person, right? And what I'm hoping comes of today's conversation is I hope that this catches fire. I hope that we are inspired today by these examples of programs and efforts that you're going to hear from our panelists, and that we move towards a reality that these are not the exception, that this is the norm, right, for workforce and for employment and for all workers in California. And as we move towards a place where this is more normal for everyone, we decrease the othering that happens when you talk about transitional age youth, when you talk about veterans, when you talk about people who have been incarcerated or impacted by the justice system, when you talk about those who are homeless or unhoused. There's a lot of othering that happens. And one thing that we can say about COVID is that it has served as this kind of shared stressor where it has created a little bit of compassion, I think, in places that were muted in the past in terms of understanding the impact of something like COVID or a stressor that many communities have been experiencing for a long time, and how it might impact your functioning, how it might impact your ability to work, how it might impact how you show up. So the time is now for us to really bridge the gap and make the programs you're going to hear about today more the norm. This holistic support programs that center wellness, dignity, agency, and whole person visibility. So with that, I want to introduce you to our amazing panelists this afternoon. I want to start by introducing Dr. Noha Abalata. She is the co-founder and CEO of Roots Community Health Center. She returned to Oakland. She was raised in Oakland, and she returned to Alameda County after medical school, which was Howard University, to address health disparities among African American residents and their root cause, poverty. As a family practice physician and later chief medical officer in Oakland's Native American Health Center, Dr. Abalata found that the standard 15-minute visits was insufficient to address the full range of her patients' issues. So that's a novel concept. It's not a novel, but at that time, right, it was new. So in 2008, she took that idea and she founded Roots Community Health Center to provide whole health care to those who lack safety net services and access to traditional supports, primarily those that were African American men, including those reentering society from incarceration, to help facilitate their journey towards self-sufficiency. Roots has since expanded to serve women and children and provides primary care, navigation services, and employment services to individuals and families in Alameda and Santa Clara counties. Roots currently serves over 10,000 clients and patients, and 89% of those are African American. And largely this group of patients are Medi-Cal recipients, which we understand are folks living in poverty, oftentimes. Roots' holistic approach is enhancing accessibility and consistency of care and enabling Dr. Noha and her colleagues to connect patients to a range of resources that support their health, stability, and overall wellness. We also are joined by Veronica Scott, who is the founder and CEO of the Empowerment Plan. She was born to parents that struggled with unemployment, mental health, and addiction. And to start, she built an organization around a simple product, the design of a coat that transforms into a sleeping bag for those experiencing homelessness. That idea evolved into a system of empowerment in which the homeless parents, I lost you. There we are. See, my screen is doing, welcome to technology. My screen did something funky. Okay, so that idea evolved into a system of empowerment in which homeless parents were paid to learn how to produce the coat, giving them opportunity to learn money, find a place to live, and gain back their independence. The mission is to prove that homeless individuals have worth and are fully capable of learning and adapting to create a better future for themselves and their families. Veronica is the youngest recipient of the JFK New Frontier Award from JFK Library Foundation and Harvard University. She has also received an IDEA Gold Award from the Industrial Design Society of America, the People's Voice Award from Diane von Furstenberg, and is one of Forbes 30 Under 30. And she is named one of CNN's 10 Visionary Women. The Empowerment Plan story has been told across the world and shared at events such as the World Summit on Innovation and Entrepreneurship and the Forbes 400 Philanthropy Summit. Amazing. Next, I want to introduce you to Michelle Clark, our Executive Director at YEP, longstanding Executive Director and Visionary at YEP, which stands for Youth Employment Partnership. Michelle has over 35 plus years in experience of youth education and employment, including over 3 decades with YEP itself. So she has led YEP to be one of the top performing workforce development agencies for high-risk youth, young people, and young adults in Oakland. She has won the White House Champion of Change Award, go Michelle, for YEP's innovative work crowdsourcing funding for a solar energy system and bringing green energy construction training to youth at YEP. Michelle has served on the Oakland Workforce Investment Board, where she helped design employment and training standards for the city and consulted with the U.S. Department of Labor on implementing performance-based contracting. And lastly, but not least, I want to introduce you to Maurice Wilson, a retired Navy Master Chief Petty Officer. Listen, catch all of that. Retired Navy Master Chief Petty Officer with over 25 years of service. Maurice is the President and Executive Director of the National Veterans Transition Services. And in that nonprofit that he co-founded with retired Rear Admiral Ron Froman, he's after serving as an advisory member for the Call of Duty Endowment. This is where he got his design, his idea and inspiration to design Reboot. And he'll hear a little bit more about Reboot later. Troubled with high unemployment, homelessness, suicide, and other issues related to military towards civilian reintegration, Mr. Maurice, designed the Reboot Workshop, which is a 3-week behavior-based transition program designed to help returning service members and veterans successfully reintegrate back into civilian life after years of military service. We know this to be a gap in our society. Since its inception, Reboot has achieved a significantly high success rate, resulting in Mr. Wilson also being recognized by the White House as a champion of change for the innovative design of impact of Reboot. To date, Reboot has helped over 3,000 military and veterans successfully transition back into civilian careers. So with that, I will pause on those amazing bios because they weren't going to tell you all that great stuff themselves because we are all humble, right? But you need to know that these folks have been out here doing this work for a long time in making strides in the experience of communities seeking access and opportunity who have been historically shut out from that access. So with that, I want to invite the panelists to share a little bit to add to their intro in terms of what energizes you. What energizes you to keep doing this work in a time of coming out of COVID, the pandemic, the endemic, where all of us are tired and there's a lot of fatigue happening? What energizes you? And I'll start with you, Michelle, please. Share with us what energizes you.
Well, I'm just very fortunate in that I have a job that I get to have a side gig in my job, which is my absolute passion. And that's working directly with young people in vocational training so that they feel smart and powerful. It just so happens my eclectic pre-YEP world is I ran the food bank, so I can teach in our warehouse program. I do a lot of personal construction, so I teach a group of women in construction, and I'm Italian, so I cook. So in our commercial kitchen, about once a month, I do a class, and I enjoy that so much because just watching them get the tools in their hands and use the skills that they have and build confidence in their abilities is just something I really enjoy. And it's kind of just part and parcel to the job I have.
Awesome. Thank you, Michelle. I love it. I feel your whole personness in the room. So thank you.
Great.
Let's kick it to Mr. Wilson.
Well, as a veteran myself, having gone through a reintegration and the pain and the challenges, I can really just kind of feel it and sense it and see the need for the support. And so in doing this, it really fires me up, gets me going to see lives changed, hope restored, people becoming whole again, and impacting some of these things that we hear pretty much almost every day. And I'm sure everyone has heard about the 22 suicides a day, which is just an unacceptable number. We've heard about the rise of veteran homelessness and underemployment. And there's another piece there, which we call the dislocated worker, which that's what a veteran is, the dislocated worker, trying to really start life all over again. And so just having been there myself and felt the pain, the embarrassment, the anxiety, the stresses, especially, after proudly serving, and then to leave from a world in a position where you had value and relevance to starting all over again, having nothing, not knowing where to go, not having the inner vision. This is what just fires me up every day. So this is not work to me. This is my mission, my passion. And we all search in life to find out what are we really here for and what are we really meant to do. And I believe in my heart that this is what God intended me to do. And so I accept this mission. I love it. I can't see myself doing anything else. And every time I save a life or support a veteran and their family, then I feel like it's the mission is well done. And so it's a big mission. We have roughly 21 million veterans. So it's a long way to go. I'll be working forever.
I love it. I don't love the state of the experience of veterans, but I love your passion and the favorable place to be in where work doesn't feel like work. It feels like your destiny and what you're called to do. So thank you, Maurice. Let's kick it to Dr. Noha.
Thank you, DC. Yes, very similar to Michelle, Maurice. I definitely feel called to do this work, and seeing the transformation in folks' lives, and that we're really addressing very long-standing, very entrenched issues. But seeing that we're able to move the needle just by really listening to our folks, listening to the community, and providing what's needed rather than the same old standard toolkits that we kind of are taught, and that I certainly learned in medical school and so forth, and realizing, okay, well, if it's working so well, then why do we have all of these disparities? And so approaching it really from an innovative lens. I get to feel like an architect at the same time as being, a physician, and really having an incredible team of 200 staff who are all pushing in the same direction. It really feels more like a movement than an organization. And that's really what keeps me energized.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you for sharing that. And why don't we round it off with you, Veronica?
All right. I really resonate with what Maurice said and Dr. Noha. I think there's, obviously my own personal experience of growing up in, homelessness and poverty with my family, and just seeing how kids are treated in that situation as if they're doomed to repeat the same life by default, and kind of growing up with that, Maurice, what you said, that shame that you're like trying to cover it up and hide from it and run from it. And I think what energizes me is being able to utilize that as a strength, and being able to utilize that as something that is part of the story, but is not all of the story. And then even now being able to look at what we're doing in the broader scheme of how we're helping move the needle with homelessness across the board, and especially in Michigan. And that, to what Dr. Noha had said, there's a lot of people that really benefit from the system the way it is now. And to see that shifting in the last few years has really been exciting to say, this, if it was working, then why are we seeing more people displaced? If it was working, like if the way that we've always done things was working, then maybe we'd be having a different conversation, but it needs to change. And it's really exciting to be a part of that. And also now to get, what started off as a little class project in college has turned into an organization. I think from this, it's seeing the data now. It's being able to tell a story and say, no, this is why it didn't work. And this is what really does move the needle. And it's really, for me, that I love a good Excel spreadsheet, like color coded, some data findings. It's really, really exciting for me. And I'm weird. So yeah.
I love it. I have a little bit of data nerd in me as well. And here's the thing that's so amazing about the work that you all are doing that we're going to hear about shortly is, yes, it does populate spreadsheets. There is data that supports your approach. And there is so much depth to what you all are doing that is not captured in the spreadsheet. This is why we need spaces like this to share the learnings and the great things that you are doing. So like I said, it can catch fire, right? And become the norm. Inform, data inform. We like to say that everything's data informed. Well, we have the data, we have the learnings, we have the experience. And we're going to get into some of that just right about now. And I'm going to start off our panel questions with Dr. Noha. And I recently came across a quote, Dr. Noha, where you said it takes a lot more than a doctor in an exam room to bring health to our community. I was like, well, simple, but says a lot. That is a bold statement, especially coming from a doctor, a medical doctor, right? And like you said, the teachings and the learnings that we come home from these institutions with, and you were able to very quickly transform. I don't know how quickly, but you were able to successfully transform the service delivery system here in East Oakland as well as Santa Clara. So as a medical doctor, Dr. Noha, and co-founder of Roots Community Health Center, can you please speak on your experiences and your observations of how being shut out and disconnected from workforce presented as a significant barrier to physical and mental health?
Absolutely. I think when I co-founded Roots with Nurse Ophelia Long, who joined the Ancestors in 2020, but she and I were going around East Oakland, going to transitional housing facilities, substance use facilities, and so on, and bringing care to the people who weren't presenting for care themselves. and really going with more questions than answers. Even though we were bringing our medical clinical expertise, we really wanted to understand, why do we have these massive disparities? Why is it that a Black child born in East Oakland has a life expectancy that's 15 years shorter than a white child born just a few miles up the hill in Oakland? What is going on? We have great institutions, hospitals and clinics and so forth, but yet these disparities are really intractable. And of course, what we found out won't be a surprise, to any of you, is that it really was poverty itself, and that folks in East Oakland have been systematically shut out of economic opportunity through redlining and predatory lending. Not to mention, racial profiling, disproportionate incarceration, and really I could just go on and on, school suspensions, all of the things that we know that are associated with poverty and racism, and that get in the way of folks being able to really thrive. And so what we saw was that for a large proportion, particularly the men in the community, who, remember, at that time, there was no Obamacare, so weren't even able to get basic medical care if you were male and poor, basically. And so we really came to realize that one of the most significant barrier to good health was actually poverty itself. And so that if we were going to do anything about it, I couldn't just show up with a stethoscope and a prescription pad and fix that. This was something that we were going to have to address directly. And so this is really how we decided to embark on developing workforce enterprises. And I know initially people were like, why is a clinic, having a soap factory? It's like, if you get it, you get it, but really the most powerful referral that I was able to make for my patients oftentimes was referral to, one of our workforce apprenticeship programs, and really could see folks' health transform more quickly than any other referral I could make. Pain would improve, depression, substance use, many of the things that are plaguing our communities. Once folks had hope and opportunity and the ability to earn for themselves and see a way forward for themselves, their health actually transformed. And healthcare typically does not see this as its role at all. And therefore, we find ourselves dealing with more disease than we are going to be able to keep up with. And so in order to get ahead of it, we really committed ourselves very early on to, we are going to do what we can to move more upstream, so to speak, and really address kind of the root causes of why there's so much illness and suffering within our community.
Thank you. Thank you. That is very, really illustrates, right, social determinants of health and the things that you were encountering, and how you broadened interventions, right? So I think what you'll hear today, those of you that are with us, is this combination, this both and, this duality between the individual intervention and the systems change and the root cause efforts that are happening. So we're not going to individually correct or individualize, individually remedy, right, poverty, right? So what you will hear today is this intersection between the direct service and the policy and the advocacy that is also necessary to really change the experiences of the communities that we are supporting. So thank you, Dr. Noha, for those examples and that share. So speaking of this intersection between direct intervention, you heard about Veronica and the empowerment plan and the backpack and the coat, and how that ballooned and expanded and evolved into a much larger idea, a system, I want to say a machine that she is leading over there in terms of addressing the pathway out of homelessness and supporting that transition for previously unhoused individuals and families. So Veronica, as the founder and the CEO of the Empowerment Plan, can you please speak to how whole person needs and vulnerability are assessed and responded to in the supportive transition of folks moving out of homelessness into the workforce?
Good question. And I think for us, it didn't start out that way. So I think for anybody that's interested, and I always speak to somebody that wants to start something as well, that has the idea, sees the need, or is in a situation themselves and wants to make an impact in their community. And I think that idea of you don't have to start with all. Like it started with became about hiring the people that would need it in the first place. And so how it's really focused on kind of seeing the immediate employment need while also trying to address kind of the Band-Aid, the individuals that couldn't get into shelters. You know, when I started an empowerment plan, there were 20,000 people counted that were displaced in the city. The actual number was closer to 40,000, and we had over 72,000 abandoned buildings. So people would disappear into the landscape and not be seen, not be counted, and not be able to get a bed. And there was only about 3 or 4 shelters active at that moment. So there was only 1,200 beds on a given night. So what can you do to keep people alive in such intense circumstances? But it was, you know, I think prototype number 10 that I heard from a woman directly at a shelter that I was designing the coat with individuals there at this warming center. She said, look, I don't need a jacket. I need a job. What you're doing is pointless. Mm-hmm. And she was absolutely right. And so I think, you know, it's important. I think that message so early on is that like, you always have to be listening. You always have to be asking the questions. So the holistic aspect of our work didn't just start off with me thinking I knew what the people we serve. Like, just because I grew up in a situation of homelessness does not mean my experience is even relatively similar to that of a lot of the people that we serve. And so what we have done over the years is we love a good survey. We love surveys. We love constantly asking and requesting, you know, what is it that you're seeing? And we also work very closely. We have our case managers, clinical social workers on our team that are saying, these are the trends that we're seeing. And because of anonymous surveying, we're also able to get a lot of data that people may not feel comfortable disclosing under normal circumstances. So we were able to see that COVID over the last 2 years went from, you know, where we saw probably about 45 to 47% of our team experiencing domestic violence to 100% of our team experiencing situations of domestic violence. And so that is when, you know, when we structure our week, people are paid 100% of the time, but they spend only about 60% of the time making the coats. The other 40+% is dedicated to that whole person, that clinical psychology, case management, GED classes, domestic violence support groups. And those things are so important, as what everybody here has said and what you have said beautifully too, is that income is a part of it, but it is only a piece of a greater, you know, puzzle of things that needs to be addressed. And so we are able, and we track vulnerability over time and seeing how that person is doing, not just financially and not just with their housing, but with mental health, physical health, emotional stability, all of that.
Thank you. That is amazing and deeply informative. And I think just want to really lift up and reiterate the piece of being able to receive tough feedback. Like, you are all leaders, and as a leader, we have to be able to listen and receive feedback. And how pivotal was that moment for you to receive feedback that the backpack and the coat was a great idea, and that's not responding to what I need right now. And so in order for us to be great, in order for us to be great partners and great advocates, we have to listen. We have to bring the voices of those impacted to the table, right? And that is what you have done a great job at the empowerment plan of doing. And so many of you are doing, which flows very nicely into youth employment partnership, partnering with youth and young adults for their own employment, for their own leadership development. I think that's key. And I know Michelle, we've gotten into the comfortability of just saying YEP, but I'm saying that slow and out loud on purpose, because that partnership is key. Mm-hmm. Youth employment partnership and partnering with communities, not serving in service of, in the absence of, right? But that part of what we started off with agency, with dignity, they being the communities impacted, have to be at the table informing these programs, informing employers. And so with that, Michelle, longstanding Executive Director and Visionary for Youth Employment Partnership, YEP. Can you share a little bit about that, which if you know me, you know that Tay has been and continues to be a sweet spot of mine, transitional age youth. And this idea which was innovative at the time, that young people aren't ready to be out there on their own at 18. So we had to change that narrative. Think about how that narrative has shifted from being an adult at 18 to being ready for the world, and how we've expanded and extended our concept of young adult and youth up to 24, in some cases 26, right? And so when you think about the developmental needs, when you think about the unique needs of the TAY and youth community, on top of racial inequity, social inequity, right, justice involvement. Michelle, can you speak a little bit about YEP's holistic approach to serving this community?
Yeah, and thanks for bringing up the partnership thing. We were founded 50 years ago by a bunch of school teachers who who got tired of their kids always going backwards every summer. And then about 25 years ago, we changed our name to the Youth Employment Partnership because we made a commitment that everything going forward we would do in partnership. And that is a primary part of how we move now. And absolutely, our young people are our partners, but our community is also our partners. What we do at YEP and why we do it is we create living classrooms, because a lot of our young people, particularly our transitional age youth, we work with younger teens, but when we work with transitional age youth, they need to have a very comprehensive environment to be held in, to be coached in, to develop trust, to learn skills, and to work against their barriers. I think the biggest thing we do by creating living classrooms is we are able to create environments where young people can safely learn through mistakes. And they can, because we know, evidence show they learn better through making mistakes. But unfortunately, the world doesn't really give them many opportunities to make mistakes. This population has such extreme vulnerabilities that they deserve a chance to be held closely to develop, right? So the mental health vulnerabilities are extreme. The violence, domestic and street, that they face is just unbelievable, not just here in Oakland, but across the country. The homelessness, the sexual identity challenges many of them are facing right now, the addiction issues, the nutrition, the health, the rejection issues they're having as they're being put out of families or in relationships, or a variety of other things. And so by creating an environment of a living classroom, we're able to address all of those things and address workforce barriers. We're keenly aware of the best way to work with a young person is in a harm reduction model and a youth development model and all of those kinds of things. But when that interfaces with work, it doesn't always come together, because it's not like employers are saying, I'm really glad you came. Maybe you smell like weed today, but it's okay. I'm glad you're here. It's more that they want to see, no, you're ready to step all the way up to what a workplace is expecting. And so in this relationship, we're able to teach both. We're able to say, this is, we want you to be taking healthy steps, and we need you to understand in a workplace, these are the steps that you're going to be expected to do. I think that one of the analogies I use often is that young people need a lot of coaching, and for all the right reasons. It's they deserve it. That's how they learn. They need to be around mentors, all of those kinds of things. And so that's wonderful. But I don't know very many young adults who like to be talked at, right? They want to be and they want to be worked with. They want to be heard as well. They want to be all of those kinds of things. And one of the things about creating living classroom environments is that it's a lot more like play therapy than it is talk at therapy. You're working alongside a construction trainer who's going to talk to you about the shooting on your street last night, and help you process through that trauma without having to say, let's sit down and talk about this right now, right? How do they keep a fluid process of getting their lives to move forward? And so that's what we're able to accomplish with our living classrooms. We run a variety of enterprises. We build a lot of houses. Right now, we're building dormitories for our young people to continue in community college, but we build a lot of housing. We do a lot of commercial kitchen, and we run a big warehouse. And those are places, environments where we teach our young people. They get paid while they're working, and it gives us a chance to really work through their barriers, build their confidence, and line up their skills, work experience, education, other basic skill accomplishments.
Awesome. Awesome. Living classroom. That is a concept there, right? That concept of those basic conditions necessary to thrive, to trust, to experience stability, to be able to take advantage of all the other great things that are in front of you, right? Just that basic things that I think we overlook sometimes. And I think that it's, you know, like, it's almost like programs are not expected to get paid for, to get funded to do the basics. Well, listen, the basics are necessary and not always a given or guaranteed. And so this idea of creating that connection, that trusting relationship, harm reduction, to meet those basic conditions of humanity, right? So that someone can engage in a developmental experience, right? Or take advantage of an opportunity to thrive and to grow. So Michelle, that's innovative and great work. And really ties nicely into what we're getting ready to hear from Mr. Maurice, just related to trust. So when we think about veterans, even if you're not military connected, we all kind of have a concept of boot camp, right? We know kind of the process of folks getting ready to enter into the military, right? And so I really am intrigued by this concept that you're lifting, Maurice, around the transition back into being a civilian, the transition back home, right? And this idea of reboot. And I know you're also doing some exciting things with AI or artificial intelligence, but just in terms of this intersection of what Michelle started off talking about with the trust and the relationship building, I hear that is very important and imperative in the work that you're doing with veterans as well, right? We know the headlines around trauma and the impact, right, that some veterans are coming with, and how that is necessary in any intervention that is going to be designed or in partnership with veterans. That is key to include. Can you share with us a little bit, Maurice, about your use of AI and data matching in the Reboot program, which I think is important to partner, but also inform choice, right? When we think about pathways and that transition back home, how are you all using data, partnership, and artificial intelligence, as you called it, to do that work with veterans?
Great question. And so, you know, we always like to start with how did one become a soldier, sailor, airman, or Marine? And so if you look at the process is pretty straightforward. And the numbers are pretty clear. Every year, roughly 250,000 people go down to what they call the military in-processing station. They take the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery Exam, which categorizes or classifies them in terms of aptitude and where they fit into the military industrial complex. And so your occupations or where you fit into the military is already predefined based upon the services themselves. Now, what's missing and what's needed in short order is the enculturation process. And so the next step after that, again, which is pretty straightforward and very science oriented, the first step is boot camp. So what happens in boot camp? Boot camp is anywhere from 8 to 13 weeks of behavior modification or reinculturation designed to change your attitudes, beliefs, behaviors, and expectations from who you are into what you need to become. In fact, we break it down into 3 distinct categories that really overall impact your efficacy, who you are. The first one is what boot camp does. It rewrites your identity. It takes you from a civilian kind of focusing on yourself into that military ethos of it's not about me, it's about us. And so the locus of control is relinquished at that particular point where now you're no longer thinking about yourself, you're thinking about others. That's step one. You get an instant identity. I remember when I went to boot camp, they shave off all your hair and you live in the same room with everybody, dressed the same, eat the same. And so your identity is reshaped. Number two is we all are driven motivationally by our sense of purpose. You know, what am I here for? What fires me up? And so what happens is the military gives you the second component, which is an instant mission, where before many young people come in the military who really didn't have a purpose. They didn't have a mission. They didn't really know what they were doing. When you ask the question, what are you going to do when you grow up? The big answer is, I don't know. I haven't figured that out. Well, the military instantly gives you that mission. And so that's component number two. And then number three, obviously, you have to have a vocation or something to do, something to connect your pride, your self worth to. And so the military identifies your occupation. So instantly, within a short period of time, you get a new identity, you get a purpose in life, and you get a vocation just like that. Imagine the intoxicating feeling that that must be to a young person to get all of that where they've never had it before. And that's what happens when you join the military. You instantly are put back together. You got a purpose. You belong. You're part of a mission, a team, a crew, and you're well taken care of. It's well structured, organized. You don't have to basically think about anything because the system is that well orchestrated. So you over time really get adjusted to that. Again, it's just like a drug kind of sorta. But one day comes that time where the person has to leave the military and go back out the gate. And that's where a lot of the challenges start, which is now you have to reverse the order. Now, think about this. You have to reverse the order yourself. The military doesn't do this for you. Now, you have to find your own new identity. You have to define yourself. You have to find your new mission, your new purpose in life. And then you have to decide on what your new career is going to be. The vast majority, and every year we return roughly about 250,000 people back into the civilian population. So there's an equilibrium here, 250,000 in, 250,000 out. But what happens to those who are rejoining the community and coming back out? How do you instantly regain your identity? How do you find your next mission? And what about your next career? Well, the numbers are pretty straightforward for us. Again, and this is where we follow the data. Well, of that number, roughly 86% of the transitioning service members don't want to do the same thing on the outside that they did while they're in the military. They want a complete career change. But if you ask that same number, okay, so what is it that you want to do? Can't tell you. I don't know. The answer is bottled up on the inside. And so, again, the things that we looked at, which really inspired us to start Reboot, was to begin to address the issue. So what's the first prevailing issue? Well, the first prevailing issue has a lot to do with identity and self-worth and who am I and where should I live? And that's where Reboot comes in. So the other name that we use for Reboot is Reverse Boot Camp. Makes logical sense. We just simply reverse engineered the military onboarding process and created a reverse boot camp 3-week process based on science that has 3 components. Week 1 focuses on rebuilding your identity, helping you reprogram yourself subconsciously so you can adapt to the behavior. Week number 2 helps you explore and find your purpose and your passion in life. Again, those are the things that are internal to you. No one can tell you on the outside what you should be doing. You need to own it yourself. And that's something that I did a lot of work on when I retired in 1998. I went to work for the Urban League here in San Diego in the workforce development department. And we work with disenfranchised individuals, older workers, ex-offenders, inmate, youth, multi-generational welfare individuals. And again, the construct was always the same, which is I don't have a belief in myself. And so as we put the workshop together, we focus on that. And then we help them find that passion. And then this is where AI comes in. We noticed that a lot of people had a great difficulty in trying to figure out what it is they wanted to do. But after extensive discussion and interviewing and job developing and zigzagging, we eventually find it. But that's after several jobs or turnovers and trying to find the fit, which inspired us to come up with the artificial intelligence program. It's called JobSet. And what that does, it actually builds a profile of the individual, collecting roughly about 650 different competencies in 3 categories: hard skills, soft skills, psychometrics, that really builds what we call a digital footprint or DNA footprint of the person that they really can't articulate themselves. And then taking that model, that digital footprint, and then matching that against millions of jobs out there in the jobs market, we're able to instantly do what they can't do. And then the discussion goes on. And so we've been able to successfully bridge that gap and then even also identify what we call the hidden careers that they didn't know about themselves. And so a lot of this, and I'll just end here, is really finding ways to empower the individual to take command and control of their life. If we don't empower them, if we don't teach them self-sufficiency, if we don't enable them and put them back on their own two feet, then we will forever have to build an army of job developers, case managers, social workers, and others to really sort of like carry them on our shoulders. Versus our philosophy is we want to put you back on your own two feet, get you very self-sufficient, operating on your own. We will have a network for you to tap into when you need to tap into the network. But for the most part, our entire endeavor is about empowerment. How do we empower veterans to take command and control of their lives without having the military there to back them up and to support them as it did in their former lives there?
Powerful. There's a question that the name of the tool that you use in Reboot is what, Maurice?
It's called Job Set.
Jobs.
And it's a artificial intelligence. The approach is pretty simple. The information is always hidden inside of the person. The person does have the answers, but you have to extract it. And so we see Job Set as an extraction tool that scientifically gets all the data points and then digitizes it, where we can now sit there and look at this is because the person can't answer the question, but the answer is there and the data does, and then we have the conversation.
Thank you. That is so powerful. It is so powerful to hear you describe how the process of coming home is normalized, right? There's so much stigma and pathology associated with veterans, right? Like, oh, our homeless veterans, or our veterans with mental health needs, or our veterans A, B, and C. But what you're describing is this revolutionary concept of normalizing and providing basic supports for veterans coming home after service, right? Doesn't, mean you have to check an eligibility box to have something wrong with you. It's an acknowledgement of someone's whole humanity and what they may have been through, right? Transitioning to redefine purpose and mission and identity. Like, those are so powerful to just name, right? I think these are things that we take for granted. And I just really want to, again, lift up. It might be the psychologist in me that's really passionate about normalizing things and the necessity to bring things to the middle, right? To decrease how we other communities and folks, like something is wrong with the individual. When we all know, because I'm preaching to the choir, that is the system that has been broken for years on years, that has perpetuated the inequity that has accumulated to be what we know as poverty, right? The social, the racial, the economic injustices and inequities that have created these conditions of poverty. So while we are all doing great work in supporting individuals get on their feet and sharing our word to impact change, I want to invite you all to think about, what partnership do we need, right? What do we need beyond the structured programs that you are all leading as a first step, right, in providing these supportive work environments and social enterprises and economic opportunities, and then people move on, right, to the world of work. So how do we influence formerly unhoused, formerly TAY, formerly incarcerated veterans? How do we support them as they continue in the workforce? How do we support the systems change in the employers in those work environments that are receiving folks? What do we need to continue the impact of the work that you are doing? So I want to invite everyone to think about it, and I'm going to ask you all to share, what are some opportunities that folks here today might think about in terms of advocating for that systems change to make this level of support normal in the world of work? How do we expand this reach and this impact? So I think I want to pose this question first to you, Dr. Noha.
It's a great question. I think, a big part of what we do is to acknowledge the fact that if we want to be of service to our community, if we want to be, a great clinic or a great, provider, then our workforce needs to reflect the people that we're serving. And that means hiring from within our community. And that may also mean training from within our community. That means also accepting the fact that folks are going to be coming with some of the same barriers that some of the people that we're serving are coming with. And so really recognizing that folks that have lived experience that reflects what is going on with the patients or members or community folks that they're serving is truly an asset. And so within Roots, at least a third to a half of our staff are formerly incarcerated. And there are not many healthcare employers that are willing to hire folks that have even misdemeanors. There are many, many barriers to even becoming licensed in any health profession, phlebotomy, certified nursing assistant, et cetera. And so I think what's needed is advocacy at all levels to say folks have done their time or folks have overcome barriers. We need to remove, we really need to remove all of those barriers that are in the way of them moving forward. And this is something that I think we all need to collectively reflect on, because we need to understand that because we've had so many systemic inequities for so long, that certain populations are disproportionately going to be impacted. And so we really make it a point, and it's from frontline staff to managerial to directors to our board, where we have folks with lived experience of incarceration, former foster youth, sexual trafficking, all sorts of lived experiences that would be seen as barriers maybe to many employers. And I want us to really push ourselves to flip that script, because especially if we call ourselves being in a helping or healing profession, we're a hospital, we're a clinic, social services agency, yet we're going to block people who could be the greatest assets in our workforce. We have to really check our own logic and I think really embrace the fact that, yes, this may be more challenging. It may mean, I think really being alert when we bring people to really use their lived experience to be the best, bring their best self into the work. That's asking a lot of people, actually. And so we also have to provide that additional support, that extra time. Like Veronica was mentioning, you need that additional time. You can't just dive right into the workforce and not address your own, barriers or other challenges that may be coming up. So I think providing a more holistic experience for employees and understanding that value is not just the degree or letters behind your name. You could be bringing actual job qualifications. So for us at Roots, for example, if you are going to be a navigator that is serving primarily folks who are formerly incarcerated, we will consider it a job qualification if you are formerly incarcerated. So I think that's a and we've had applicants. Did I read this right? It's like, yes, you read it right, because we value the experience that you have gone through. So I think that's step number one. I think the other thing is for us to all think about how we can contribute, right? So even just walking down to your purchasing department, where do we buy our X from? Who's our caterer? Who does our laundry? Where do we buy our soap? Where do we buy our signs? Because we can truly make an impact by not just going with the cheapest widget, but really saying, how can we make an impact by supporting social enterprises, by supporting those who are employing people that we know not everyone, we know that government is not necessarily going to be able to be a second chance employer all the time. We want that. And I think we need to continue to advocate for that. But in the meantime, they have tremendous purchasing power and should be thinking about all of our academic institutions, our hospitals, should be thinking about how are we procuring in a way that is socially responsible. And if we can procure, from local organizations who are actually training and hiring people who have otherwise been marginalized or shut out of the workforce, then you are also making an impact. So I think at every step of the way, from hiring to supporting employees to also how we are using our, every precious dollar, I think we can all be part of sort of changing this narrative and also really sparking change.
Awesome. Flipping the script indeed, and great examples of how we can do that and how we all can contribute, whether you are in charge of an organization's purchasing or if you're just making a little bit more of a pause and a conscious decision in how you purchase and who you support. We all have an opportunity to kind of shift that in resource this change that we want to see. So thank you, Dr. Noha, for those examples. I'm looking at our time, so I'm going to get to each and every panelist. So take about 2 minutes for this closing question. And Michelle, I'm going to come to you next. In terms of opportunities to partner and support this growth.
I actually want to really support what Noha said. I think that in the many years I've done this work, the biggest evolution in this work is about the staffing, what assets staff bring to the work, and really looking at how their lived experiences have really contribute to solution finding and make our work more efficient. But I also want to say that we need government to partner much better with us on how we support that. I think that while we've seen this in a million ways, we have never seen it more clearly than in the pandemic. And that the government isn't at the table to help us value the assets with pay rates and other things that our community members need and deserve, even if they don't have pedigrees, right? And so where's the best skill set to me is very different than what a conventional salary range is for them. And really getting them to understand this is our community, and these are the skills we need, and these are the skills that our community has grown, and now we need to put them to work. And so that's clearly one partnership I would love to see. And I'd actually really love to see that partnership with labor better too, not just with government. And so that's one thing. And then the other thing is I really want to support the local purchasing and really looking. I feel like this workforce challenge that everybody is having is an extraordinary opportunity to work with a B Corp or a nonprofit and put together your industry in a way that you can support our community members to learn and develop and produce and get paid and all of those kinds of things. And I feel like, I hear so many people complaining about workforce, and I'm like, we had to pivot and get out of the box, choose a community partner and put it together. There's lots of opportunity out there. And then sometimes what you'll find is the most extraordinary experience you've had in your business. So those are the two things I would ask for.
Awesome. Thank you, Michelle. I'm going to go Maurice and then Veronica, please.
Okay, I'm going to try to be brief on a topic that I spend a lot of time talking about there. So, let me first start off with the African proverb that it takes a village. And no one single organization can impact the life of an individual by themselves. So you have to work with community partners. And this is where the whole public-private partnership comes in. But again, it involves understanding what everybody brings to the table, how government really works, what it does do, and what it does not do, and then what really is the role of community. And so what we've done here is we formed a large collaboration, a coalition of over 164 member organizations who meet on a regular basis to co-plan the reentry and the journey of all the veterans in the community. And in doing so, we serve as what we call a force multiplier. That's a military term. That we force multiply. We break the roles and responsibilities down to who is the best at what they do, what are the best practices, who's the subject matter expert, and let's create this integrated model following the Stanford innovation model of collective impact, where again, you got your shared agenda, mutually reinforcing activities, common metrics, if you will, backbone organization. So we've really taken an extreme community organized approach to all of the resources, even creating a integrated communication intranet where we can communicate with one another, share things back and forth, because as a force together, we can do a whole lot. But again, if we operate as an individual, we don't really have all the power. And it really diffuses our impact. And so we're now seeing incredible results because we're not just going after the individual. Let me just say this as a final note. We're not just working with the individual, we're working with the individual's family too. So we always have to include, if we're going to be holistic, then we have to be really holistic and look at the whole family. And that has to be part of our equation, and it has to be part of our collective consciousness that this is what we're doing. And so, and finally, we have to have a plan, and everybody has to be on the same page in terms of what is the plan and what's my role. How do we know we've succeeded? How are we measuring, and how are we ensuring ongoing success with the goal of empowerment, empowering families to be successful. I'll stop right there.
Thank you, Maurice. And Veronica, I'm going to kick it to you.
Very fast closing notes. I love what Maurice said, and also Michelle and Dr. Noha. I feel like all I'm going to do is kind of tie up all of these things, because I've seen this a lot in Detroit, is this competition between nonprofits and overlap that creates disconnect and silos and a whole bunch of waste of funding. So I think there's a couple things, Michelle said that the role of government should be also in helping facilitate what you're doing, Maurice, and like actually creating a real continuum of, okay, where does each organization fit within this system and how do we work better together? Because it's a lot of work to do what that requires. And then also I think there should be a lot more like public-private partnerships. I think sometimes corporations look at nonprofits as like this kind of ugly, they're not real business. And I think there's a lot that can be learned. And I think we're hearing a lot more from corporations and private companies about how do we hire, because now they are desperate. And I think we can seize this opportunity to tell them that they, like Dr. Noha says, they have been missing out on incredible people. And how do we support them? And how do we offer that and train them in that process? So I'm just going to leave it there.
Thank you so much. And I am not going to keep us long. I'm just going to thank the panelists and just final closing note about opportunity. There are a lot of experiences that we, lifted up today of hardship. And I hope that you are all walking away with the theme of opportunity, of partnership, and of what's possible, right? And how we can leverage this shared experience of COVID and conversation and dialogue around economic recovery. And how do we make sure that the communities that have been disconnected from those opportunities, how do we make sure they're in the fold? How do we make sure that their experiences also are being centered as we're talking about the new workforce and economic recovery? So there's opportunity ahead of us. I want to thank you again, our esteemed panelists, for sharing all of your wisdoms and your insights. And thank you all.